for the first time after 6 long, challenging, downright miserable at time years, your Arizona Wildcat football team is going bowling. What are they going, Damon?
Going bowling, man.
They're going bowling. Welcome in, PHNX Arizona Wildcat postgame show. Mike Luke is out tonight, recovering from some dental surgery. Ben White, Damon, John Schuster, Brad Allis with you. Arizona 27, UCLA 10. Going to get to all your comments and thoughts here over the next hour. Damon, starting with you, 3 consecutive wins against ranked opponents. The Wildcats are going bowling, and this football program is at an all-time high, my friend.
Yeah, I mean, the last time that we went to a bowl game, I worked for the team and I was a freshman in college. It's crazy to look back on it. Like, it's just so long ago. I mean, just electric, man. I looked at my friends watching the game and I was like, what if I told you after, at the downslope of the Sumlin years, the absolute bottom, that this is where we would be at right now? I mean, you would tell me I was crazy. And just what a moment. Feels great. Feels so good to be back and relevant. I've never seen a defense in my whole life watching the Wildcats. I've never seen a defense this good. I'm not old enough for the 90s teams, and it's just incredible. So much fun.
Yeah, the 90s teams defensively were better. But, and Arizona, of course, was, in the early 90s, 10-2, won the Fiesta Bowl, 8-4 the following year, could have been 11-1 that year. The team in 98 was exceptional. So, all the history aside, what Arizona is doing is a remarkably impressive thing. And I think they've done it from a steady standpoint. And over the course of the last month, they've been a very good, steady football team. They've limited mistakes. Earlier this year, you'd routinely see Arizona commit maybe 8 to 10, penalties a game, and those are the types of things that worked against them. In this game, the last few weeks, they've been able to limit things like that. But I thought tonight's game had, there are some interesting numbers to break down about tonight. A couple things that popped into my head is obviously what Arizona did defensively tonight. Gave up 10 points, but UCLA had excellent field position off an interception, had excellent field position off a blocked punt, and got 0 points on both possessions. And that is indicative of how borderline dominant Arizona's defense was tonight and how good the Cats' defense has been. Something that Arizona football coach Jedd Fisch said earlier in the week, something to the effect of Arizona's a good team in all 3 facets. And while obviously you don't want to punt block, Arizona has done things very well. They were steady on the offensive end. I think the key number in that regard, I think the Cats finished 10 of 14 on third downs. That's important.
16, yep.
That's important. Thank you, Ben. That's important because it keeps UCLA off the field. And UCLA's entire game plan is to grind you offensively and wear you down in the fourth quarter. And the Cats did a very good job of dominating those aspects of the game. And even though they struggled to score in a game that to a large degree was played between the 20s, their ability to convert on third down was very helpful in regards to keeping UCLA off the field. And I think UCLA folks might say, sure, but, by the end, you were playing with a third-string quarterback, but for most of the game, they weren't. And Arizona was the better team tonight.
I think one thing you got to notice is, and yes, you mentioned the numbers, and Ben had the updated ones, 11 and 16, and 2 or 3 of those were conceded third downs, basically. I mean, they didn't care on that last third down where they led to the field goal that put them up 17. There was the 3rd and 17 where they were just trying to get back into field goal range. I think they ended up being a little short, so they punted. But that's when it really counted, they were able to convert those third downs. Conversely, you mentioned the defense, and you're really kind of whatever prevent, and I hate to call it a prevent because they still gave up chunk plays. That bizarre defense they ran at the end against Oregon State, and then you're not going to convince me that's a catch. I'm sorry. When most of the ball is touching the ground. So Arizona easily could have gotten out of here with 6 points, 9 points. So yeah, really great defensive effort that again, at times was bend but don't break. But that's college football. I mean, college football, the days of Desert Swarm, 1.9 inches per carry or whatever, it's never going to happen again. But this defense, I mean, yeah, she mentioned 94 and 98, or maybe that was Ben. At the very least, it ranks with the best of the Stoops era, and that was what was supposed to be his calling card. So and whether this is Johnny Nansen finding his stride in his second year, whether this is the Dwayne Aquina input, whether this is just, as Mike would tell you, it's probably 99% Big Bill Norton. 10 points in a Pac-12 football game, spectacular. Again, it could have been 6 or less.
And that's what's so remarkable about just the entire turnaround in really the last 3 or 4 games here, Damon, where Brad just hinted there. You break down this defense, not accustomed to what we're seeing around here. You bring in a lot of different guys on that defensive line. Guys in the secondary are really showing out. And Arizona has a number of different options they can go to in terms of playmakers. And it just seems like tonight, all those guys were in positions at the right time, Damon, to make those plays.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the D-line there. I mean, when was the last time we could rotate 8 D-linemen that were like legit players in and out? I mean, I know I already said it, but just never seen anything like that before. It's pretty jarring, and it's just I mean, I honestly, I kind of don't even know, like, I don't know what to do with my hands. You know what I mean? Like, what do you even say? Like, it's just the beginning too, really. I mean, I know, you could get into concerns about if Fisch is so successful, what goes on there. But I mean, think about, you would have thought that after those someone years, this would have been a long process to rebuild this roster. And yet he did it in about 2 seasons, and we're competing with all of the top teams in the country, the Washingtons, even USC. They're not great, but you're in games with everybody. Like, we're never out of a game with this team, and it's just it's incredible.
And we talked about this a couple of weeks ago after they knocked off, now I'm going to draw a blank, the team before Oregon State, where Arizona, you could see, after that victory, you could see a path. Washington State, when they won that game, you could see and you could see the improvement in the U of A. And it was a long shot, but you could see the path of Arizona actually being able to win its share of games down the stretch. And now I think the different thing that you talk about, now, it's going to be very interesting at Colorado, because things change for Arizona this week now. Arizona now has the target. Arizona can't play the underdog nonsense. They can't play the plucky little team, all that other stuff. All that stuff's gone, which is fascinating. Arizona this week will very possibly be among the top 5 stories in college football, because they are, and you'll hear the thread. Damon, you've talked about it. Ben, you've talked about it. They haven't been bowl eligible since 2017. Someone had them in the tank. Fisch has done this so quickly. Gronk was here over the weekend. It was a sellout crowd in Tucson. It's for a town, this is going to be written somewhere, if not a bunch of places, for a town that the sentence will be something like this. For a town that usually is looking forward to basketball, Jedd Fisch has made Tucson a football town. Now, what happens when you have that kind of publicity, which is wholly unusual for Arizona football and has not been something that Fisch has had to deal with, or the players have had to deal with? It's a great problem to have, but it's an interesting learning experience. You go up to a Colorado team next week that's not as good, but but they're good enough to where if you lay an egg and let it get to your head, Colorado could win that game and take a lot of steam out of what you're doing. But generally speaking, if Arizona plays solid from this point on, they're better than 2 of the teams remaining on the schedule. And Utah, even though it loaded up on ASU today, is not consistent offensively, and you have them here. So what you're looking at now that you're bowl eligible is to be greedy. If you play steady and you play smart, every win starts to get you a rung higher up the ladder. And if things break your way, and it's not out of the realm of possibility it could, Arizona might finish 3rd in this conference. And if you're third in this conference, you're playing in a pretty damn good bowl game. And that is an insane accomplishment, given not just what Arizona was in year 2 and the improvement that they, or rather in year 1 and the improvement that they made in year 2, but even the Arizona team that we saw against Mississippi State. We're 5 or 6 weeks removed from that, and we're seeing an entirely different football team and possibly an entirely different football program. And from a Wildcat and Tucson perspective, that's unusual territory, but it's nice unusual territory.
Yeah, Shu mentioned the possible third place finish, and really, if Washington wins out, that's a second place Pac-12 bowl slot. Something I don't think Arizona has been in since the Rich Rod era, when they went to the Fiesta Bowl. So we're in rare territory now. Again, they have to finish strong. Unfortunately, we saw this under Stoops a few times under Rich Rod, where Arizona has a lot of momentum and then can lay an egg against, again, Colorado's not a good football team, but they have a lot of good football players. They made that bizarre change today or yesterday with the offensive coordinator, which didn't seem to work. 55 yards at the half, not a good number. But, Arizona does not have that margin for error. They just can't go out and assume they're going to win. But again, there's no doubt that this team can not only win football games, but win in a variety of ways. I mean, as good as they were tonight, and they basically dominated UCLA, they still only scored 27 points. They're not putting a ton of points on the board consistently. They're efficient. UCLA had 1 possession in the third quarter. Some of that is Arizona's ball control offense. Some of that is the new clock rules. Either way, they were down 2 scores after Arizona went on an 8-minute drive. It was a field goal. But when you're only getting 1 possession, whether they get 2 or 3 in the fourth quarter, but one of those came off the block punt. You can win in a variety of ways. And again, Arizona has proven that they have a clutch field goal kicker. Their punter is usually very good. The defense has been winning football games, and the offense has been efficient. So again, it's pretty exciting that they can beat you in a number of ways. And, they might have to get into a shootout next week in Colorado, or conceivably you could see them just harassing Sanders all night long, because that's a porous offensive line for Colorado. And you might get something like you saw tonight.
Aside from the defense, I thought there were a lot of other good things, and we're going to get to that in just a minute. If you're just joining us, Arizona 27, UCLA 10. It's the PHNX Wildcat postgame show. Ben White, Damon Fairall, Brad Allis, John Schuster. Mike is out tonight. But first, let's talk PHNX diehard. No better time to become a PHNX diehard right now, my friends. Arizona football is going to a bowl game. It is the final stretch. Arizona basketball returns to action on Monday. Lots of good stuff there at the PHNX website. Take a look at the show notes. Free watch parties. We have a weekly newsletter by our guy Anthony Gimino that comes out on Thursdays. All exclusive content, a Discord chat as well. Check it out in the show notes. Become a PHNX diehard. I thought offensively, and Brad mentioned it, I mean, this isn't a team this year that has scored a lot of points per se, but they've been very efficient. And Brad mentioned this last week, and it was a continued theme this week. And I think it was really critical, especially when it came to Arizona just establishing rhythm offensively, is the number of different players we've seen be incorporated into this lineup over the course of the last few games. You look at somebody like Speedy Luke, who got in there. You look at somebody like DJ Williams in the backfield. This is a really deep backfield, and this is also an Arizona receiving core that incorporated 8 different guys, actually 8 different guys tonight there, guys. You're seeing a lot of different guys offensively get involved here, Damon.
Yeah, I mean, Tanner McLaughlin, that catch he made where, Fifita kind of threw him that high point ball and he got nailed in the back. I mean, and then obviously T-Mac Cowing, they're going to do their job every single time out, but there's just a stable, man. Like it's depth that we haven't seen here in such a long time. Rich Rod had teams where it was like, yeah, I mean, everybody did their job, but they were, they kind of were plug and play in his system in a way. These guys feel different in that they all feel like real players, like every one of them feels like they they're not all like the top heralded guys either. Some of them. I mean, Tanner, he's from Southern Utah. Lemonius Craig. I mean, he wasn't like super highly sought after in the transfer portal. I mean, we're all of these guys that the talent evaluation is just off the charts right now, and it's incredible.
And I think some of the obvious thing here is obviously what Fifita has been able to do to limit turnovers. Arizona had a lot of these weapons before, but DeLauro would take 1, 2, or 3, situations during a game that would probably work against him. Arizona turned the ball over too much, and then that's something that would quell drives and work against them. Fifita had one bad pass early today. Beyond that, he was pretty, generally, it wasn't a perfect game. UCLA's pressure on the front line is problematic, and Fifita probably needs to learn he has to get rid of the ball a little bit quicker. But generally speaking, Arizona has obviously been a much more effective, if not perfect, offense since he's come into the fold. At the very least, he's been a stabilizing factor, and it's clearly benefited Arizona on the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah, I think it's time to look at Arizona in perspective as an NFL offense, and that's what Jedd Fisch has said he wanted to do. Atypical for an NFL offense to score 50, 40. And with the new clock rules, I think it plays in Arizona's favor. When it's running correctly, and it runs correctly with Fifita, it didn't always with DeLauro, you're going to use 7-8 receivers. I mean, look at good NFL offense. Sure, for every team with the Justin Jefferson, you get a team that hits 3 running backs out of the backfield, 3 or 4 receivers, a couple tight ends. You go on the occasional 7-8 minute drive. You don't always go deep. You take what's there. And Arizona's able to do that, which is what I think Jedd Fisch wants to do. Even Chip Kelly had to change what he did. He can no longer just run that, that version of the spread that he ran. I mean, he became trying to pound it a little bit and then he threw in some triple option night. But that's what this Arizona offense is. It may not consistently score 40, but if it can score 27, 35, chew up a lot of clock, keep the defense fresh, then the defense could have games like it is tonight. I mean, I think that's the formula. Arizona, I think ideally probably wants to win a bunch of 27-17 games, 27-10 games, as opposed to Rich Rod, who wanted to beat you 49-47 and, make sure that the 5-4 receivers get plenty of touches.
Yeah, on the defensive side, Anthony Gimino put this out on Twitter. If you're not following him, it's at AG Wildcat Report. Only 4 touchdowns allowed over the last 5 games. 0 against Washington, 1 against USC in the stretch, right? 0 against Washington State, 2 against Oregon State, and 1 tonight. That's been really the blueprint for this team the last few weeks here.
Yeah, that's an astonishing number. And obviously, if you do that sort of stuff, then you're in position to win some football games. And it's one of those things where I don't even know, generally speaking, who Arizona's linebackers are. Because their defensive front is so impressive, and not just impressive generally, but certainly impressive by Arizona standards. And at recent, maybe since turn of the millennia, Arizona standards, their front line causes problems for the opposition, and their secondaries damn good. And that combination has been very good to a good recipe. They put pressure on quarterbacks, even if quarterbacks like a little bit of mobility, and their secondary has been very strong. That USC game now 4 or 5 weeks ago becomes kind of interesting in that it's the last time that Arizona gave up a bundle of points. But since then, against some quarterbacks who are good, but maybe had some things work against them to some degree, they've been the more impressive looking football team. And even in the USC game, I think just visually, one of the things that was interesting, and I think Mike talked about this quite a bit when it happened, is that, and it says a lot about Arizona's overall talent improvement, is that if you didn't know who was on the jersey in that game, given all the hype that USC gets, you wouldn't really know which team was which. So that says, I think, a lot. Arizona, we're not really accustomed to this kind of talent across the board. And even even if it's 3-star talent, it's well coached, well constructed 3-star talent. And one of the things that Brad noted, I think rightfully, in regards to Arizona wanting to be an NFL offense, it feels to me like the coaching staff almost wants to make them kind of the college version of an NFL team. They feel that way defensively as well. It seems like whatever the approach is has elements of that. So being well-rounded, I think, has been a big key for this team this year. But in addition to being well-rounded and having a lot of guys on both sides of the ball, what they've been able to do in the front four and what they've been able to do in the secondary, I think has gone a long way toward mentioning, highlighting what Jamino just brought up on that social media platform that we call this.
And Damon, the thing is, too, I mean, we're not talking about a bunch of vanilla offenses here. Now, granted, UCLA does struggle. We'll get to them offensively here. They've had quarterback issues all year, but we're talking about Michael Penix at Washington. We're talking about Caleb Williams, the best quarterback and might be best player in all of college football at USC. Wazoo is no joke either. Neither is Oregon State. I mean, this is really impressive here.
Yeah, I mean, these are good teams. I believe Washington, we talked about it on that post-game show. That was, I think, at the time, the lowest point total that they had on that on the season. UCLA, I mean, like you said, not a great offense, but we did our job. I mean, that's you can only play what's in front of you. And as aforementioned, like, they were in some good spots to score. They got some good field position, and the defense just didn't let up. Anytime they made plays, they blocked that kick. Incredible. I don't know. It's so shocking to me.
It's so foreign to say, right?
Yeah, it's like I'm talking about a completely different team than the one I've watched my entire life.
Brad,
because they are.
Yeah, I mean, again, the defensive game plan has been different every game, and that's what I find really, really pretty fascinating. With Michael Penix, it was to try to eliminate the big play. With Caleb Williams, it was really try to not let him pass. And if it wasn't for a very curious touchdown right before the half, hey, that sounds familiar. And really, Caleb Williams freelancing with his legs. And if anything, it kind of, ironically enough, reminded me of a Stoops era game where those running quarterbacks gave that Tampa 2 defense fits. Tonight, they didn't let UCLA run the ball down their throat and really put it in the hands of their quarterbacks. And while, Garbers is just meh. The young kid seems like he might be okay. I actually was really impressed with the third string guy.
Yeah, wouldn't you go with Dante Moore out of all those guys?
Actually, no, I think the other guy he was slippery at least. He avoided the rush, but yeah, Dante Moore got hurt too as well on that one play. But again, it's much like UCLA over the last 10 years. They've had a good quarterback for 2 of them. Why does UCLA not have a quarterback? Makes no sense. It was like when at the end of the Tedford era, I was like, how does Cal not have a quarterback? But yeah, I do want to comment. Reading the thing, we've had a couple of people asking about how do you, as Arizona, keep Jedd Fisch? And ironically enough, it may be the move to the Big 12 because there's what do you call it? An elite void there. I mean, with Texas and Oklahoma leaving, there's not an elite football program. And I don't want to say Arizona can become elite, but someone's got to fill that void. Is it Oklahoma State? Does Sonny get things back going at TCU? Is it Sanders at Colorado? Is it Utah? Or to quote Fisch and everyone who's come before him, why not Arizona? So it may just be the fact that you no longer have a conference with 2 or 3 blue bloods or new bloods. I mean, again, the most consistent program there is TCU, but that was with their prior coach. And other than that, it's Oklahoma State. Utah. Yeah, so there's a chance that Arizona could fill that void. Again, that's a long way to go, but that could be something because I saw someone mention Michigan State. Do you really want to go be in Michigan State and be at best the 7th best program in the Big 12 or the Big 10? No. Michigan's always going to be better. Ohio State's always going to be better. USC should always be better. Washington should always be better. Or go to the Big 12 where, again, it's new uncharted territory. So, again, let's not even worry about that. Let's relish this because, again, there's 3 more big tests ahead of you. including your rival, including a really good Utah team, including a really crazy Colorado team that's you're going to have a lot of eyes on you next week, potentially, if people still care. But yeah, it's a fun place to be for Arizona football.
3 big more tests. We'll get into all of it. If you're just joining us, Arizona 27, UCLA 10. We're going to get to all your comments, all your questions. Arizona going bowling for the first time. Shu, what are they going? Say it with me.
Well, bowling.
There we go. But first, let's talk about Hero Bread. We're all looking for a nutritious breakfast item, lunch item, whatever it may be. If you're trying to get some carbs in the morning with some peanut butter, or maybe a nice lunch or sandwich that Brad Allis needs to pack for the office. Well, look no further than Hero Bread. They make sliced breads, buns, tortilla, all kinds of good stuff available at hero.co and in Amazon. High fiber, ultra low carbs. So all of us who are trying to get lean here for our winter figures, it's going to be a helpful thing. You might want to check it out. Hero.co, Hero Bread, high in fiber, low carbs, good stuff. Check it out. Code PHNX to save on Hero Bread today. That's hero.co to save 10% today. All right, let's look at a couple of these comments here. And I think Tommy makes an interesting point here. And obviously the offense has struggled dreadfully tonight for Colorado. And the program has leveled off to reality. And we have a good idea of it here. But Shu, again, Boulder, all high at this point. 3 more games. You got to really stay concentrated. And just with the level of attention that's going to be on you now, the fact that it's Deion Sanders, the fact that it's Colorado, should be a victory for the Wildcats, but it's something you got to take seriously as well.
And it really becomes interesting the way things have sort of transitioned. Because if you were looking at that game on the schedule, you'd think that given all the hype that Colorado had 2 and 3 weeks into the season, especially after the win against TCU, that they would be the one that took the air out of the room. But now, by virtue of knocking off 3 consecutive ranked teams, it's Arizona, I think, that's going to get all the publicity up there. And again, Arizona is a better football team, and right now they're a better football program, and they should be, because Jedd Fisch is in his 3rd year here, and Deion Sanders is in his 1st year at a massive reclamation project at Colorado. This is how it should be. It was frustrating early on to a large degree when some folks in the media, because they thought it was exciting and they have the attention span of TikTok, decided to anoint Colorado as a national title contender after it knocked off TCU by 3 points in week 1. That was just stupid. They're just not there. And that's not taking anything at all away from the job that Deion Sanders has done up there. And I think probably will continue to do up there. He's made Colorado a very interesting brand. He does get a lot of attention. That's good, but these things take work. Fisch's version has been a little steadier, much more under the radar from a national standpoint. In the 1st year, they were an expected disaster. In the 2nd year, they were more competitive, had 1 game where they got the upset. It happened to be against UCLA, but nobody really paid attention nationally. They were 5-7. They were kind of forgettable. This year, they didn't start out impressively at all. Their over-under wasn't all that good, and it looked like they were going to be generally in that neighborhood, especially at the time when you looked at the schedule ahead of them and how good this league looked like it was going to be. And I think how good this league still is. But now that Arizona has done what it has done and looks legit doing it, they are and should be the favorite going into Boulder and going into Colorado. But the interesting thing I think that they have to now face is, again, something that they have not had to deal with, and this program hasn't had to deal with for 10 years, attention, and getting a lot of it. So while the coaching staff has been down this road before, I think it becomes fascinating how they deal with that aspect of it and how well Arizona responds to it. And that's the most interesting test about this. It isn't that Arizona should go to Boulder and win, but if Arizona goes to Boulder and wins and limits mistakes doing it and looks about as steady as they have up to this point over the course of the last month or so, then I think that's a really good sign moving forward.
Brad?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're going to learn how Arizona plays with the expectations. I don't think target on their back is quite the right thing because, frankly, other than those who are still slobbering over Dion, no one's going to care about this football game. Because, frankly, this is the least interesting game Arizona's played since UTEP. Because they've played 5 straight ranked teams, and again, I agree with you. Some people have looked and teams have struggled since Arizona's played them, but they've played 5 really good football teams in a row, with one great team being Washington. I think the other interesting thing about this, looking back at this stretch, is just how much Arizona's improved and how much of that, I know some of that's Fifita, but you could argue Arizona's 2 least impressive football games were NAU and UTEP, who are bad football teams. Granted, NAU doesn't recruit at the same level, I know, but those were the least, and then throw Stanford in there, who again is a bad football team. Arizona has looked better against good competition. And again, this has been a pretty big gauntlet of late. With, again, is UCLA great? No, they're good. Oregon State is good. Washington State is good. USC is good. And Arizona has either beaten them or should have beaten all of those schools. So, yeah, I think I'm very, very impressive. So now the big question not only is how does Arizona deal with success, but how do they deal now having a game that's not against a ranked team, having a game against a lesser team. Granted, more talent than those other bad teams they've played, but an incomplete football team that is, again, as noted, in a rebuilding phase that has maybe brought in more talent than, say, Arizona did in year one, than ASU is doing in year one, but it's still a team that has completely flipped their roster in a matter of a couple months, really.
I want to get to buy the numbers here coming up, get Damon's thoughts and everybody else's. Arizona 27-10 over UCLA, 6 wins on the season. They are going to a bowl game for the first time since 2017. But first, let's talk about Empire Today. What is Empire Today? Your go-to shopping spot for flooring and everything carpet. Everything is quick. You get a professional and quick installation, price match guarantee. Empire Today is the best place to go to get new flooring. So, of course, they have copycats, but Empire Today can beat on that quality, that service, and speed of service. So maybe you're doing a little bit of a remodeling project. Maybe you're putting new floors in. Maybe you're fixing up an old place or a new place. They are the spot to go. Empire Today/PHNX is where you go. Schedule a free in-home estimate today. All listeners receive a $350 off discount on the service when they use code word PHNX. Restrictions apply. See empiretoday.com/PHNX for details. All right, let's look at the numbers here. Yeah, 415 yards offensively for Arizona, 27 points. A lot of that came in the second half there. First down's a big key for them, Shu, especially like you mentioned, that third down number earlier in the show. This offense just at times, especially when need be, was able to really move the ball effectively there.
And when they were able to do that, that has a lot to do with 35 minutes on the clock. If you were going into this game, those are numbers that UCLA is probably accustomed to. They like to take time off the clock. They like to wear you out in the fourth quarter. And it was Arizona that did a very good job of that. 4:15 in college football doesn't jump off the page at you. However, 4:15 against UCLA does. It's about 150 yards more than UCLA averages defensively. So Arizona was able to spread it around and be very effective in that regard. And again, UCLA made some really good plays to keep them in the game defensively because they're a good defensive team. One of the things that I think we've generally noticed in this stretch is that, and in no way is this to suggest a disparaging. This is not a backhanded compliment by any stretch of the imagination. What Arizona has done is impressive, and Arizona is a problem for everybody left on the schedule. That caveat said, Arizona has done a good job being a more complete team, and Brad touched on this a little bit earlier. They've been able to find and scout very well the flaws of the other team, and I think exploit that. Washington State is a team that, because of what UCLA did the week prior, UCLA's defensive game plan against Washington State was excellent. Arizona basically modeled its approach after that and was incredibly successful. Washington State has since tumbled. They've lost, I think, 5 in a row. Teams have figured them out, and Washington State hasn't been able to make the necessary adjustments. Oregon State's a good football team, but there are some inconsistencies there, and Arizona was able to take advantage of it. UCLA is not consistent on the offensive end. Arizona was able to move the football enough to keep them away from doing what they want to do, which again is wear you down over 3 quarters. And then in the fourth quarter, they just kind of control the football game. Arizona did a great job of keeping UCLA's offense off the field and converting themselves on third down. And I think that was an extraordinary number. But all that said, Washington State now excluded. Arizona has played better football against an Oregon State team that I think is legitimately has top 20 talent, probably on the low end. I think UCLA is very representative in that category as well, especially when they're a little bit more stable from an overall quarterback standpoint. So Arizona, the Arizona has beaten 3 ranked teams in a row. I think in reality, you look at what's out there, there's once you get past a top tier, and even to a large degree, the top tier is a little wonky, but there's a lot of flawed football at the college level. And Arizona has done a good job exploiting that flawed football. But even with those flaws, I think you're looking at teams across from you that legitimately belong to be ranked where they were. And Arizona has been better than them in each matchup. So a lot of folks are asking, where's Arizona going to be ranked? Will they be ranked? Of course, they're going to be ranked this week. Where are they going to be ranked? I don't know. I think they ought to be, if I was doing a ranking, I'd probably slot them at around 18. I'm guessing they're going to come in at around 21 or 22. But again, overall, they're going to get attention. And now we'll see if they can keep building. And the way that the schedule works for them, you have a Colorado team, Arizona is better, a Utah team that is flawed offensively. And Arizona is now showing that it's maybe one of the top 3 or 4 defenses legitimately in this conference, which can be a real problem for Utah. And you have an ASU team that is not very good. They're pesky, and everybody's going to say, oh, rivalry game. Oh, rivalry. That's a game Arizona should win. So, the Cats are have put themselves in a really good position here to still do a lot of things. We're excited tonight about Arizona being bowl eligible. But the reality now is that you work your way up the ladder, and again, you can be in a pretty damn good bowl game before this is all said and done. And it's right in front of them. So if they remain steady, limit mistakes, and play the way they have the last month, there's no reason to believe that the Cats aren't just going to go to a 6-win bowl game where you're eligible, but they're going to go to a legitimate bowl game and play a legitimate team across from them, hoping that allows to build them into a year 4 that we feel like there's all kinds of opportunity out there, leading into what Brad said about not being a dominant team in the Big 12. I have no idea what to expect out of the Big 12 next year. I don't know if any of us do. But you look at Arizona and say they're going to be in the there's reason to believe the Cats could be in the conversation. And if any of us had said that 6 weeks ago, I think we'd be in straitjackets right about now.
Damon, then Brad.
Shu, to your point about exploiting, each team's weakness, I think that speaks to just the balance that this team has, right? They can beat you in so many different ways. They're good at almost every position group across the board. I honestly, what would you, if I asked what was the weakness of this team, I honestly couldn't think off the top of my head what would be the glaring hole that they have. I mean, and going into Colorado next week, I think Colorado it's pretty well renowned that they have good skill players and that they struggle a little bit more up front. I think our lines are maybe the strengths of this team. We haven't really touched on the O-line that much yet, but UCLA's D-line has multiple NFL players on it. And while they were good and they were making some plays, they weren't game wrecking like they have been in a lot of other games that they've played thus far this season. So it's really impressive. The O-line is really impressive. And I think that the O-line and D-line next week will really help us going into Colorado. I don't think that they'll be able to handle that pressure, and just speaks to the balance overall of this squad.
First of all, to touch on Shu's point about finishing out the season strong, if they get 9, let's say they win out and they go 9-3, that's the 4th best season of the modern era. I mean, this is an Arizona team that has, I argue the best night of the Stoops era was that team that beat BYU in the Las Vegas Bowl. That was an 8-win football team, I think. There's been 3 double-digit win teams, and that include, the one Rich Rod team. But we want to go back to those stats you put up. Arizona won time of possession by 10 minutes, and we talk about Arizona being efficient. Just look at the official box score, excluding the final possession, which was essentially a run out the clock. Arizona had 8 possessions, scored on 5 of them. 5 of their last 7 because the interception came on their first possession. So Arizona, while not being an explosive offense, while not being one that's going to put 40 something on you, taking advantage of the strengths of Noah Fifita, which is accurate passing, taking what the defense gives you, and the new clock rules, which cuts out 2-3 possessions a game. It feels like. Rich Rod, I always felt like ran about, what do you run up 90 plays a game, and this team I think is running like 60. But it's something to look at as Arizona moves forward, because my guess is you don't want to get into a shootout with Colorado. You want to take advantage of what Damon said, the front lines. Arizona's better on offensive line, but Arizona's better on defensive line. Utah is going to be a slugfest because Utah is in some ways similar to Arizona. In fact, that they're strong on defense, that they're strong on their lines. And then ASU's ASU. But I think it's very interesting that, you can look at it and your first thought is, 27 points. It's not bad. But 25 scores on 8 possessions is pretty darn good. It's efficient. And that's not sexy. It's not exciting. It's not, Washington scoring 52 today. But Arizona also didn't give up 42 today like Washington did.
So the conversation, obviously, with Jedd Fisch becomes Pac-12 Coach of the Year. But Shu, if they win these 9 games, is he in the conversation for college football Coach of the Year?
Yeah, probably. But question to you guys, because I thought maybe if Arizona, I thought this question might come up. How do you guys view awards like Coach of the Year? For instance, you have, and I think there are 2 different categories here. One category is, for instance, you can talk about Fisch certainly legitimately being in the conversation for Conference Coach of the Year, but you got a guy in Oregon who's got 1 loss, who may be coaching the best team in the country, and they are kicking the living hell out of people now. And you got a guy in Washington who's still undefeated. So, is your Coach of the Year the guy who's overseeing the loaded, talented teams that are supposed to be pretty good? Or is your Coach of the Year the guy who has most overachieved based on the talent on his roster?
I would argue that Lanning's probably out because he lost to Washington. Right now I would probably give it to DeBoer because most people, I did pick them to win the conference, but that was mostly because I just like being a contrarian. And I really like their skill position players. You can make an argument. I would say that it's ironic that 2 of the best coaching jobs in America right now are at basketball schools. And it's what Jedd Fisch is doing at Arizona. It's what Lance Leipold is doing at Kansas.
Right. With
a backup quarterback, by the way. Their starting quarterback who's dynamic. And I, for some reason, because of that time slot and my dad's affinity for the Jayhawks, I watch a lot of Jayhawk football. But what he's doing there is outstanding. And until a few weeks ago, you might have been able to throw Mac Brown and Carolina in there too, as well as Duke. But, I think if they run the table, obviously you got to give it to DeBoer. It's not necessarily a great coaching job from coaching up, from overcoming adversity. But if you run the table in the Pac-12, that's rarely done. And, a big win over Oregon, which, again, you could argue maybe Oregon should have won. Big win today over a still talented USC team. And, I know Penix is probably one of the 2 or 3 favorites for the Heisman, but he's done a great job. But if you want to throw, frankly, Jedd Fisch and probably, and maybe we should just name the award after him, Kyle Whittingham, what he's done with no quarterbacks. I mean, he's going to end up being an 8 or 9 win team again. I think there's some very good coaching jobs in the Pac-12. And really, other than, I think, Lincoln Riley Everyone else is coached about where they're supposed to be. As much as you'd like to bury Dion, that was supposed to be a 3 or 4 win football team. Stanford was always going to be a train wreck. I actually think Kenny Dillingham's doing a pretty good job with what they have at ASU. And the rest of them are about what they're supposed to be. So, yeah, I think Fisch deserves some serious consideration. He won't win it, but he's done a heck of a job, and give him credit.
We'll circle back to that. I want to get to Noah Fifita and some other things that this offense did tonight. Maxwell did put up the comment, but first, BetMGM. BetMGM, it's the official sportsbook of PHNX. Place your first BetMGM sportsbook wager through the BetMGM sportsbook app of at least $10. First-time customers receive $200. That's $200, yes, 2 zeros, of instant additional winnings regardless of your wager's outcome. How do you do this? 4 easy steps. Download the BetMGM Sportsbook app or visit betmgm.com and sign up with code word PHNX. Sign up and deposit, like I said, at least $10 into your newly created account. Place a wager in the amount of at least that $10 at standard odds price. And once you've done that, you get $200 in free play. Let's talk about our favorite bet. And I'm going to break the rules here a little bit because Arizona is going bowling for the first time since 2017, as we've been talking about throughout the night. I am going to rewind, Shu, and I'm going to pretend like today is Friday, and I'm going to tell you to take the over of 5.5 wins. That is my BetMGM bet pick of the night there.
That is incredibly brilliant. If only BetMGM worked that way, and you could tonight bet that whole 5.5. You deserve to nail that, right? And our good pal Mike Luke, has said this throughout the year. If he, he may have, should have listened to Mike. He's been saying take the over on that one. We'll ignore what Mike said 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and 4 years ago. But darn it, this year he got that over correct. So. That's a good thing and a testament to obviously the U of A and Ben, your remarkable retrospective betting abilities.
I hate to give Mike any credit, especially when he's not here, but he would have been right last year. They eclipsed the win total that I think it was 3.5 last year. So I have to give Mike credit.
Brad, Honor Scout, did you have over or under 5.5?
I had over, but I cautioned everyone that I thought it was a very real possibility Arizona to be a much improved football team and have nothing to show for it because of the schedule. But when Mike held my feet to the fire, I did say take the over. But I could have seen a scenario where Arizona was 5-7 because of, again, Washington, USC, Oregon State, Washington State, UCLA, Utah. Because I knew the league would be good. I knew this. I don't know if I knew the top half would be, as good with Washington, but I worried about this stretch because this was a killer stretch. And to their credit, Arizona's now essentially 3-2 against these 5 really good teams. And even if they go 3-3 with a loss to Utah, it's a really special run. I guess, and maybe you should just know that every few years you're going to have a magic October. I mean, we had it with Khalil Tate. He had it this year. I know it's whatever it is, November 4th, but we'll extend it to a couple days.
Yeah. BetMGM, the official sportsbook of PHNX. Now, real quick, let's hear the disclaimer.
Problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Colorado, D.C., Illinois, Indiana, Kansas, Louisiana, Maryland, Mississippi, New Jersey, Nevada, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, Virginia, West Virginia, Wyoming. Call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369 New York. Call 1-800-327-5050 Massachusetts. 21 plus to wager. Please gamble responsibly. Call 1-800-NEXT-STEP Arizona. 1-800-BETS-OFF Iowa. 1-800-270-7117 for confidential help Michigan. 1-800-981-0023 Puerto Rico in partnership with Kansas Crossing Casino and Hotel. Visit BetMGM.com for terms and conditions. U.S. promotional offers not available in D.C., New York, or Ontario.
All right, Shu, before the great Shane cut you off there with the disclaimer, go ahead.
No problem. And I remember some of the post-game conversations that we had, Ben, where one of the things that I thought was kind of similar to what Brad just said, in that Mike and you were talking about, Arizona's got, they're going to win enough games to be bowl eligible and so forth. And I hedged on that. Hedging, by the way, is an online gaming term. And the gist of it was that, yes, Arizona has 6 or 7 win talent, but they're about to play a bunch of teams in a conference who have 9 win talent. And they're going to be underdogs in all these games. And how is this going to go? And then they got up against Washington and that that first quarter was brutal. It looked ugly, and then they fought back into it and made it pesky. At the time, it was like, plucky Arizona, Washington on the road kind of, took it off the gas pedal. But now we're finding out that Arizona maybe is a heck of a lot better and maybe made a lot of necessary changes. The USC game was frustrating because a lot of folks didn't think Arizona was going to win that game. But then when they had a chance to do it, it was frustrating ultimately when they didn't. But what has happened since then is that now it's Arizona that is another in this conference 9-win talent team. And they've been able to propel themselves into this conversation about maybe finishing in the top half of the league. And if you said that after the first 5 weeks of the season, that's absolute lunacy based on what's ahead of you. But the Cats have done an excellent job and now have a lot of good things to play for. So one of the things that happens is that we have this tendency to break improvement into seasons. Season 1, Arizona was bad, long rebuilding. Season 2, Arizona was, getting a little bit better. And in season 3, Arizona's going to be, somewhere in that 7-win. Now we hope season 4 is going to be that big jump. But I think what happens a lot of times, you never really know at the time, but you look back at it and there's a moment or a game or a sequence or situation during the season where you go, where the real separation occurs. Arizona in the first 4 or 5 games of this year looked a heck of a lot more like season 2. Arizona the last 4 weeks has looked a whole heck of a lot more like what we hope Arizona is in seasons 4, 5, 6, and move on. A consistent football team that is in the conversation for very good bowl games.
Yeah, maintaining success is the hardest thing at Arizona. If you look at it, and it's true at a lot of programs, but Arizona will hit a peak, and, under Tomey, they were allowed to hit 2 peaks, 94, 98. Stoops had his little took him forever to get there, to his little mini plateau, which essentially was, that again, I always say that team that played in Las Vegas, and then through probably the Oregon game when then they lost in double overtime and the program went pew. Same thing, Rich Rodriguez made it to the Fiesta Bowl, went to several bowl games, but how many of them were 6-7 win teams? And then again, within 4 years, he's gone. So the secret, and again, you can say that everywhere, or almost everywhere. Colorado just 4 or 5 years ago was in the Pac-12 championship game, and they were awful before that, and they were awful since. Other teams have peaked, but the secret now to Arizona is trying to sustain success. They have to build. Let's just for the sake of argument say they go 8-4 this year. They lose to Utah. They beat the other 2 bad teams. What do they do next year? They can't. If you're building a program, you can't regress. You can be an 8-win team again, but I think that's the hardest thing at a place like Arizona, at a place like Colorado, at a place. We've all seen these peaks. Oregon State under Erickson. But the secret is the difference between the USCs and the Washingtons. And, to their credit, when Oregon, was under Harrington, went to the Fiesta Bowl, they didn't drop down. They kept going, and they've been able to sustain it over multiple coaches. Can Arizona do that not only this year, but she's right. Yeah, go back to all those great seasons. Sometimes it's the year before where there's that moment. For Arizona in 94, it was the year before when they lost to Miami by 1 in a game they should have won. That was the birth of Desert Swarm. You can look at Stoops and you maybe look at Rich Rod. There's a moment in all those seasons where you have that special win, that special run. And if you can build on it, like they were unable to do with Khalil Tate, but like they've been able to do this year, then special times can be ahead. Now you're incumbent upon Jedd Fisch to continue to build on it.
And I think Ben and Damon, one of the things that Brad's alluding to there, and this season kind of reminds me the most of 1992. In 1991, Arizona played a bunch of freshmen, and some folks, historians, our good friend Anthony Gimino has argued often that maybe Arizona played a lot of those freshmen a little bit too early.
Yeah.
The Brewskis, the Waldrops, it's a lot of guys on that roster, and Brad will know the years better than I will, but there were a lot of guys that gave Desert Swarm an opportunity to be good in that 2.5-year window that kind of defined the first Tomey era of Arizona football. But the two games that Brad noted, in addition to Miami losing 8-7, I think was the final where they lost to Miami. McLaughlin missed about a 55-yard field goal that had an opportunity to win, and that defense just completely dominated that game and dominated for the rest of the year. Arizona in that season then went on a 5-game win streak. And in November, around this time of the year, had an opportunity to go to the Rose Bowl, which now is a very different thing because of alignment and the playoff and the rest of it. But in this era, the great frustration for the University of Arizona is that they were the one team that had never, in this conference, that had never been to a Rose Bowl. Now, again, that doesn't matter as much because of, not the conference champion doesn't always play in the Rose Bowl anymore, and the Pac-12 is about to dissolve and blah, blah, blah. But at the time, that was a huge deal. And Arizona had an opportunity with 2 games left in the regular season. And they lost one of those games 14-7 at USC, heartbreaker, where the defense was awesome. And they lost a 7-6 game to ASU, where they gave up the defense, gave up 110 total yards. 110 total yards, 55 yards of those on one play, and lost the game 7-6. So Arizona, and then lost a bowl game and a close defensive battle as well.
The Freedom Bowl, where they gave up about 155 yards as well.
And they were 6-5-1, I think, at the end of the year, something like that. But then in 93, that defense solidified, and the defense was good enough for Arizona to win games against most teams with an offense that was still woefully and frustratingly inconsistent. So this year feels like a little bit like that to me. Now I don't think the way that the schedule works and how teams ahead of them, they don't play Oregon, and Washington as the tiebreaker against them and is still undefeated. Arizona's ability to get into that title game is almost impossible. But if they do what they can in front of them, they can avoid the pitfalls of what happened more than 30 years ago. And hopefully, from a Wildcat perspective, the folks watching then listening to this broadcast, Arizona next year has the kind of momentum necessary to be a really interesting contender heading into a conference that is uncharted territory for a lot of us.
Well, listen, you got some good teams in front of you, but at the same time, with the way college football is shaped out, the way that the Pac-12 is shaped out, it's certainly not an impossible test these last couple of weeks. Talk about Shady Rays here real quick. You need some good sunglasses. We're living in Arizona. I know it's cooling down. The 100-degree weather is hopefully gone for now, but you need some good sunglasses, and this is where Shady Rays comes in. Mike Luke talks about it all the time. You want to look cool. Wear Shady Rays. Great, built-to-last, premium polarized shades. They offer the most insane protection in all of eyewear. Every pair of sunglasses is backed by the lost and stolen replacement policy. So what does that mean? You break it, you lose it, no problem. All of us do it over the years, wasting money on sunglasses. That's okay. Shady Rays will replace the sunglasses, no questions asked. Exclusively for our listeners, Shady Rays is giving out their best deal of the season. Go to shadyrays.com, use promo code PHNX, 50% off 2+ pairs of polarized sunglasses. Try for yourself the shades rated 5 stars by over 250,000 people. And then FOCO. Let's talk about FOCO a little bit. The leading manufacturer of sports and entertainment memorabilia, shirts, all kinds of good stuff. I know John Schuster is a big Phoenix Suns fan. A lot of good stuff out there. I know John Schuster is a big fan of the NBA, as I say with sarcasm. But nonetheless, go get yourself a Phoenix Suns shirt. Go get yourself an Arizona Cardinals shirt. All that good stuff there. FOCO has the best back for Arizona sports, and they have yours too. Get the best gear around by visiting FOCO.com using code word PHNX. For all non-presale items, it is 10% off PHNX as well as that code word. Let's circle back, and this is not somebody who we've given a lot of love to tonight, but we need to continue to talk about him, Damon, and that's Noah Fifita. Another spectacular performance. I get the interception was bad. I think there was a miscommunication there in the route between him and Tanner McLaughlin, but 25 of 32. Brad used the word efficient several times, 300 yards, 3 touchdowns. There's no quarterback controversy, as John made it clear a few weeks ago, but this kid just continues to ball out there, Damon.
Yeah, and I think the thing that impresses me the most is that third down conversion rate against a defense like UCLA's. The fact that it felt like every drive was so methodical. Every time that we would get to those third down spots, he knew exactly where he was going to go with the ball, and he knew exactly where to place it, where only his guy was going to end up with it. Just wildly impressive stuff from Fifita. And he's continued to be impressive all season. You mentioned obviously it looked like there was a little bit of a miscommunication with McLaughlin there on that pick. I bet you if you just looked at Fifita's picks in a vacuum, they're not 50-50 balls where the defender's coming down with them. A lot of them don't look too pretty, but his ability to come and bounce back from those interceptions, especially early in games, and continue to play well throughout. In that USC game, I mean, obviously we lost when he threw that interception. I believe we were up 17-0. But he didn't let it phase him. He didn't let it phase him again tonight. And he just continued to play his game. And for a guy his age, it's something that you really can't teach.
Brad?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the key. He doesn't let it beat him down. One interception doesn't become 3 or 4. Conversely, other thing, and I know someone on the side here on the chat mentioned it, but I can't remember who. But when he takes a sack, it's a 5-yard sack. It's not a 12-yard sack. It's not. And again, Delora made some spectacular plays by running around like a crazy man. But I'd much rather have one pick and minus 12 yards in sacks than 1 touchdown, 3 picks, and minus 40 yards in sacks. Again, Fifita, game manager is not right. He's not a game manager. You put up 300 yards and 2 touchdowns. That's a little more than game manager. But again, I think efficient's the right word. He doesn't force a lot of balls. And when he does, he throws them high to his 6'4" receiver, his 6'5" tight end. He makes smart plays, and he doesn't let negative plays throw him in a downward spiral. And that's easy for anyone to do, especially a kid who's essentially 19. And that's been, again, the important thing about Noah Fifita compared to Delora. You might not get that spectacular, although tonight the throw to McMillan in the end zone, that was spectacular. But more often than not, they're going to look more like the pass to Cowing, over the middle, or the slant to Lamonius Craig. Not good throws, good reads. They don't make Sports Center,
but that's okay.
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Because they lead to W's, and that seems to be one of the themes. If you're looking, Arizona is kind of, and again, it's interesting in a conference that has a lot of really good quarterbacks. USC is flash and sizzle. They can't play defense. Oregon's outstanding. I think Oregon's the best team in the country, and I think they're probably going to run the table. I think they're going to beat Washington in the conference title game, and I think they're going to be a real problem in the playoff. You got Penix at Washington. I'm not sure I wouldn't take Penix at the top of the list as far as quarterbacks are concerned if I was drafting at the next level. But. And then you have Colorado, which got all the attention in this conference because everybody loved to talk about Deion Sanders. Flash, 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 and here comes steady Arizona. Hardworking, just got nothing particularly impressive. The numbers look solid, but nothing really jumps off the page. Probably can't name really 3 guys out on the roster. The rest of the country doesn't know that they're in the upper half of the conference and have knocked off 3 consecutive ranked teams. Certainly they don't know it's the first time in this program's history that that's been done. And there's nothing wrong with slow and steady and the build. It's great that Gronk gets here and he's, the crowd gets excited and, puts some eyes on the program. That's obviously great. And you have to go out and recruit and you have to do some things from a marketing standpoint to make it interesting. But I think one of the themes that we've seen about Arizona is that they're almost an under the radar blue collar football program. They're hardworking. They're steady. They seem to be doing things right, and it's paying off for them. One of the things that Brad talked about, he mentioned Stoops and he mentioned Rodriguez, and I think I'm gonna because on the bottom of the screen here, because gravity has worked against us because we're old. Brad and I'm going to use a old man reference for our good pal Brad Allis over here. One of Brad's favorite bands, and you guys should listen to this band because they're very good, is a band called Queensryche. Brad likes to use Queensryche as the musical example of how most bands generally are if they're good. They're kind of a bell curve band. So there are albums at the bottom that aren't particularly good, and there are 2 or 3 albums that are excellent, and then they kind of drop off again. Arizona, you can use that comparison, that timely and apt comparison, for the Stoops era and the Rodriguez era, where they, you had to start from some very difficult positions, and then they managed to work their way up to a plateau, but there was a leveling off point that you could see and an inevitable drop. So far, Arizona is a football program this year that has a legitimate chance to be 8-4 in the regular season and possibly 9-3, and we don't feel like we're at the peak. There's no indication right now that Arizona is anywhere near peaking. And that's a really good feeling for the stability of the program overall.
It's interesting. I agree with you. Arizona kind of, that workman-like, and it's ironic because, again, there's 2 other teams in the league who are doing it very effectively, and that's Utah and Oregon State. And in reality, that's what Tomey tried to be. That's what Stoops tried to be. And with some, but that's, I said when they we're looking for a new coach. They need someone with a niche. Because you're Arizona, you're not USC. You're not going to go get all the 5 stars. Arizona has gotten a few really good players, and I think what it comes down to is I think Arizona has running that pro style offense. And while Noah Fifita will be hard pressed to carve out an NFL career because of his size, there's going to be some guys who, because everyone else is playing spread or playing this, or the NFL wants guys who know how to play pro style. And the other one is, that, for lack of a better term, blue collar. We're going to put a bunch of mildly athletic 300-pounders in the middle of the defensive line. There's a reason Bill Norton had to leave Georgia, because Georgia has a bunch of 300-pounders who run 4.4s. But you do that, and then you find your undersized linebacker. And then, you know what? We are going to go grab some 6'4" corners. So you got this combination of NFL size, but in many ways, that blue collar, OKG, if I'm allowed to say that anymore, mentality. And I think that's now become kind of Arizona. And again, Tomey put a lot of guys in the NFL, but Tomey at the end of the day wanted to play this very grinded out blue collar. It wasn't that his offenses were bad. Sometimes his offenses were completely handcuffed. I mean, look at the talent that 94 team had, 93, 94 team had, scoring 17 points a game, because he handcuffed them. And then the Fisch isn't going to do that. But he's found this niche. Now, can he build upon it? I don't know. But Shu's right. They could win 9 games this year, and we still feel like it's a building block season.
Brad, I saw it in the comments earlier. I'm not recalling who wrote it, but I want to get everybody's thoughts. What did you think? I mean, we're talking about the offense. We're talking about efficiency. What did you think there of that trick play getting JDL in?
I'll be honest. I heard it. I didn't see it. I was driving back from my son's baseball game. I like trick plays. I hate it when Jedd Fisch uses them, and I don't know why. Mostly because they don't work. I think when you are trying to run this efficient offense, maybe it's not the best place. It seems to grind their momentum to a halt sometimes. So I personally would like to see him. Again, I don't hate the idea of trying to find Delora, a couple snaps here or there, a trick play. But right now, when your offense seems to be at its best, giving the ball to Jonah Coleman and Michael Wiley, and then throwing over them, the relatively safe passes to the other T-Mac, I don't know. Save them for when you really need them. Save them for when you're down 7 late and you need something. So I would rather not see it, because again, they don't seem to work, and they always seem to halt momentum.
Damon, then Shu.
We texted a little bit about it, Ben. I don't like it when I don't like Fisch's trick plays in general because a lot of them are very momentum killing. That particular one didn't bother me as much because I think if JDL throws a good ball there, I think that's a pretty big chunk play. There was 5 blockers with 2 defenders on that side of the field. Hypothetically, it should have worked, in my opinion. JDL just didn't do his job properly, and that's a whole other discussion. But the ones that bothered me a little bit more were kind of like some of those drive-killing screens that they were running. They were getting 4 yards at a time, 6 yards at a time, and then they would throw it behind the line of scrimmage. And UCLA, with their really, really impressive defensive line, was snuffing them out a little bit. Those bothered me a little bit more than the JDL play. But in general, yes, Jedd Fisch trick plays are not my favorite thing in the world.
I think, and Damon's right. Maybe we're having a slightly different conversation here. If that play did what it was supposed to, it actually had an opportunity to work. A lot of the other trick plays that he's run were just blown up from the get-go. They weren't deceptive enough. I think it was too early in Arizona's development to ultimately be effective. And so from a defensive standpoint, you're kind of expecting something because you're not doing the foundational stuff correctly. Where this looks to me like a Belichick thing. But a lot of the difference here is that, Belichick type teams do everything well. And so when you do everything well, the defense has to try to stop you. And when they're committed to trying to stop something, then you spring the trick play and it works. Arizona is at the steady point right now, and steady is their best track. Stay on that track and you're going to be effective. The further development of when you're able to pull something like that out, I think is something that's perhaps, well, it can't be any less effective. But I think it has an opportunity to be more effective for Arizona if the Cats are doing this week in and week out where they're 11 for 16 from third down and you can't get them off the field because their running game's good and their passing game's good and they're doing a lot of solid stuff and they're frustrated and they're frustrating other defenses. Then when the defense again commits to something, you have the opportunity there. I think there's a little bit more flash and flare that isn't necessary right now. That's something to probably spring on them more effectively in the future. But at this stage in Arizona's development, I don't think they're there right now. And I think, and I feel like most people probably fall into this camp, they're a lot better off doing the things that they do well before they worry about something that takes away momentum.
I either want to see them kind of build up to it more. It always seems like they throw them out there in the first quarter. But why not run a play? And now you can do that too. Where you line JDL up at wide receiver and you run the play. And, you just have him run a streak downfield so he doesn't have to block anybody. Put some things on tape, I guess, and then try to exploit it. Because I don't feel like any of these trick plays that you've ever shown it again and then you exploit it with, even if it's just a basic, we're going to make it look like we're going to do a double pass to the wide receiver. But in reality, we're just going to hand it off to Jonah Coleman because we're getting that linebacker out of the box or we're making the safety shift over. And I just don't I feel like it's almost like Henry Winkler and Waterboy. I drew up a bunch of cool plays in my secret notebook and I want to run them. Because even with Belichick, some of those things he threw out there, again, she's right. They were to set up other things. We're going to show you Julian Edelman passing, and guess what? Next time, he's not going to throw the pass. He's actually going to run the ball or whatever. I just feel like a lot of times it's just Jedd's, I don't want to say ego, but just trying to be too cute sometimes. And you've kind of predicated this team's success on not being cute, so why be cute?
One of the things that I think is frustrating here and maybe it's part of the learning process, and generally speaking, up to this point in Fisch's career at Arizona, and whatever the Fisch vision is clearly effective. And when you get into how you feel about Fisch overall, it's mostly at this stage a lot of nitpicking, especially over the course of what he's been able to do and what his team's been able to do over the course of the last month. But I feel every now and again, Fisch needs to be reminded that he's coaching college kids and not pros. And so every once in a while, when he starts to throw this stuff in there, I think, or there'll be some other plays every once in a while that a Rodgers can make or a Brady can make, and maybe your younger, relatively inexperienced college quarterback, those are throws or positions that you can't quite execute at this stage. I think maybe, and he's, hopefully this is less and less and less. And again, it's very nitpicky, but I feel like sometimes he forgets who's in front of him. And he needs to be reminded, and the trick plays come into that category there. I guess curiosity from your guys' standpoint, in December, Arizona re-upped Fisch. I think he's under contract through 2027. It's a weird place for Arizona football to be because I think you have to go back 40 years looking at a coach who basically, a coach at Arizona was the death knell job for their career over the course of the last 40 years. So this weird conversation about other people are going to look at Fisch is an entirely different animal from an Arizona football standpoint. But if that's the case, if you guys believe that, and again, they re-upped in December in the offseason, and I think he's under contract until 27.
Yep.
So do you guys give him a raise? Do you try to keep him in the fold and make the buyout a little bit more difficult? Or do you leave things more or less as is, believing that Fisch is going to stay around a little bit longer and see this through?
Well, I think historically, when you look at Fisch, right, I mean, obviously this is the first time head coaching position for him, but it's no secret, Brett, that this guy has jumped around from job to job. And with the nature of college football, the way it is, NIL, how important money is, I would think Arizona has to do something, at least going back to the drawing board. Do they not?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think the job jumping thing is a little overblown, especially, I don't know if you listened to his interview with Peter Schrager from NFL Network, where he explained, like, every time he thought he was going to stay in a place longer, he's like, how do I not go work for Bill Belichick? How do I not go work for Sean McVay? How do I not go get a chance to call plays, which I think it was at Michigan, maybe, when he thought, sometimes the coaches get fired. If it's me, I think, again, I think you have to see how the rest of this year goes and how the recruiting class goes, which is, again, pretty good. And they had some nice kids in today. But I think the big thing you got to do is I think you've got to make his family want to stay.
Yeah.
Because I think, Shu mentioned, yes, it's the death knell job, but a lot of those guys had opportunities to leave and didn't. Tomey had a few opportunities. I don't know if he was going to get those jobs. Remember, Shu, we were in Vegas, ironically enough, doing that double dip, which could happen again this year. The Iowa State rumors for Stoops. What did he do? He usually signed an extension. Rich Rod flirting with South Carolina. By the way, Rich Rod almost beat South Carolina today with Jacksonville State, which was actually the best game of that window.
No doubt.
But yeah, Fisch has the young-ish kids. He has moved around a lot. I think in many ways you have to kind of do, that's what worked with Lute and to a lesser extent Tomey. Had younger teenagers, things like that, where you don't want to move again. And again, I think the idea of being able to go to the Big 12 and maybe, again, fill that power void. I think the fact of being stable, being a good place to live and raise a family. But yeah, at some point you have to pony up some more money. And whether that's this year or next year, it's going to happen sooner rather than later, or some other perks that, and I don't know what it is. Because apparently if you give the people mining stock, it's not worth much when they're done, because I think neither Sean or Rich Rodriguez made a whole lot of money from that mining stock that they were given.
Damon?
Jedd Fisch, it was mentioned earlier a little bit that I think that move to the Big 12 could be a thing that helps propel him to stay.
I think that's what it is too. Yeah.
Yeah. Just the sheer lack of a dominant program or team that we can't compete with, I guess. I mean, I'll put that in quotes because we've competed with the best of them this year, but there's not an Oregon, there's not a UW going into that conference. I mean, Utah is probably licking their chops thinking that they're going to be the top dog, but TCU, I mean, great run last year, but not all that impressive this year. Baylor, down year, been pretty good recently. Oklahoma State, as we mentioned, but there's no reason we can't be in those schools. That same trajectory with the way that Jedd Fisch has kind of built this program, and I think if he's looking at like a long-term future, and he's looking at like the sustainability of this program, there's no reason why we can't be one of the top dogs in that conference for.
See, I think I also think it's a good league, though, and I don't want to undervalue, even though with Oklahoma and Texas leaving, I don't want to undervalue the Big Ten by any stretch of the imagination. You know, Gundy's been at Oklahoma State for what, 20 years? They're pretty good. They're a solid. They're a really solid football program. We're talking about. Let's be realistic here as well, okay? And we all agree the trajectory looks good. Fisch has done a remarkable job, and the potential is certainly there. But when you're talking about football stability, generally speaking, there's a hell of a lot more teams in the Big 12 and the teams that are coming over from the Pac that have more stability than Arizona does in that regard. Arizona's a hell of a lot closer to Kansas, who is having, also a really good year, than it is to an Oklahoma State team that's been good. Baylor is so mercurial that they're hard to figure out. They're either 10-2 or 2-10, it seems. TCU, Gary Patterson was at TCU for 15 years. They've got great facilities. They're in Dallas. They're good. And Sonny Dykes can win. Sonny Dykes can coach.
Yeah.
They can win. Like Brad noted earlier in the broadcast, the coach at Kansas has the job. That's a ridiculous job, and they're fun to watch. There's a lot of Texas football, a lot of Texas talent in Oklahoma football. There's really good football in that league. And so having this odd Pac-X arrogance going into that league, I think is a mistake. It's good that Arizona is moving in a trajectory, a positive trajectory. But I think week in and week out, remember, this is the Pac-12 is generally a very balanced conference. This is the year, but that they've been really good. But there are some dogs in this league too. And I know that there are some dogs in the Big 12, but you look up and down that line, you got a lot of teams that are not unfamiliar with winning 9-10 football games on a reasonably consistent basis. And let's be fair, we're right now talking, I think Brad mentioned this, an hour ago. This may be Arizona's third, 9-win season in how long? It's been a really good month for Arizona football, but there's some good programs elsewhere in the conference that Arizona's going into too. So I really don't know what to expect. And I'm not sure anybody does in terms of what we're going to see as Arizona moves into a new league.
Yeah, I think you have to caution. I think there's a power void. There's not many dogs in that league. I know someone mentioned, UCF and Cincy. UCF has a undefeated season in the last 5 years. Cincinnati, and I know it was the different coach, was in the tournament 2 years ago. The Big 12, as it's going to be constructed, is going to be this bizarre league where there's really no dogs. I mean, obviously every year you have to have a dog, but everyone's been relevant. You could argue that Arizona, Cal, and ASU may be the three worst programs over the last 5-6 years in that league, with maybe Kansas thrown in. But at the same time, again, you don't have a Washington, you don't have a USC, you don't have a Texas or Oklahoma. So it's who can grab that brass ring, for lack of a better term. But it may also be a league where you have 8 champions in 8 years. Because, again, Baylor is always capable. Again, we mentioned TCU under Patterson, and, we all like Sonny Dykes. Iowa State has been a 9-10 win team within the last few years. Cincinnati, Houston, I think, could get a big boost. I don't know if Holgerson's the right guy. And really, I'm really upset someone got the DUI, because we could really have the realistic possibility that Rich Rod could be back in Morgantown soon.
Can you imagine?
And
we could have had someone back in Houston. It's not going to happen now. But that's the whole thing. The league, I think, top to bottom, is better than the old Pac-12. But it's also, again, doesn't have the highs right now. So who are those teams going to be? or is it just going to be a different team every year, which it could be?
Well, and it's the most diverse league, I mean, arguably over the last at least decade or even 15 years. I mean, you pointed out Kansas. I don't think anybody who was paying attention all that closely or just vaguely, I guess, as a college football fan, saw that coming. I mean, there have been stretches, whether it's Oklahoma State, like with Gundy, whether it's Baylor, every team within that conference at some point, at least the good majority of them, they've had their moments where they've shined. The one thing I do worry about going into this league, and it'll be curious to see how Jedd Fisch adjusts, but on the offensive side, Damon, Schu, these are teams that are putting up, 35, 42 points a game. Arizona obviously has a very efficient offense, but you're going to probably have to get to a point where you're able to put up some more points here than what we've seen this year.
Yeah, and I think, but conversely, you could also talk about the defense and say we might go in there and have the best defense in the conference the second that we join. To shoot what she was saying earlier, I don't want to demean those programs. I think there's a lot more middle teams in the Big 12. Like someone mentioned it here in the chat, Big 12 doesn't have as many bad teams as the Pac. I think the Pac-12 does have some teams that are easy to beat up on, and the Big 12 is very kind of inconsistent in the way that, an Iowa State could be bad one year, but then they're going to go to a New Year's Bowl in another year. And it'll be interesting. I think it's more just that the ceiling of this program in that conference could be higher than what it is in this conference, because there's not really a world where I can foresee that we would ever, be able to consistently play with Oregon year in and year out. I don't think we have the resources for that. In the Big 12, there's no team that I look at that I think we can't compete with.
Shoot.
I think it'll be a lot of fun. And I'm very fascinated. And actually, one of the things that I'm really fascinated about is how Utah adjusts to this. Utah has carved a really good niche about being a hardcore physical defensive team that just kind of is an outlier in this conference. But I don't know how that plays week in and week out against Texas athleticism. So I'm fascinated of whether they can maintain that impressive 10-win run that Whittingham continues to do up there, which is absolutely remarkable. So the other Pac teams I find fascinating in that regard too. How does general California talent function in a Texas conference? That's something that I find very interesting. So, it's one of those things that I'll look forward to. And frankly, at this stage, I don't have the answer. I'm not sure any of us have the answer. And I think, while I'm not terribly enamored with the conference, with the Pac-X unraveling, it's a new adventure, and we'll see how things go. We can deal with the new adventure next year. That's a lot of conversation in the off season and certainly in slow times during the summer. But there's still a lot of excitement as far as Arizona is concerned in regards to what it has in front of it this year.
All right, Brad, let's put a wrap on this. Arizona obviously takes on Colorado next week. It's going to be a day game. You got Colorado, you've got Utah, you've got ASU. What do we need to look for these next 3 weeks here?
Yeah, I think you got to see Arizona continue to improve. And because Arizona has improved a little bit each week, really. I mean, in some ways, Arizona benefited from Oregon State's clock mismanagement last week. The week before, obviously, there's just a total thrashing of Washington State. But there's still room for improvement. The offense can get a little more explosive. Maybe the defense just needs to not have that one bizarre series at the end of a half. But
and a turnover, please. Can we get a turnover?
They're going to have to face some really good skill position players next week. They're going to have to face a really disciplined, well-coached team the week after. And then you got the crazy rivalry game. So we got to see Arizona not get complacent, continue to play their kind of brand of football, and make slight improvements throughout the rest of the season. And if so, 8 or 9 wins is not only not impossible, but it's probable.
Damon?
I think the game that interests me a lot that we didn't touch on too much is that Utah game, just because I think that maybe in a weird way, Utah and UCLA are a little bit of a similar mold in terms of not the best offense, but a really, really good defense that's tough to beat. And interested to see if it'll play out similarly to how it did tonight. I mentioned that balance earlier, that we can beat you in so many different ways, and I'll be interested to see if how that one plays out in particular, because I think it'll. I mean, not that like we know how good this team is, but it'll be it'll just further, kind of signify the litmus test, I guess, for this season. That Colorado game, I mean, it'll just be fun, I think, because of the pageantry around Colorado right now. I think we're very well acclimated to beat those guys.
Shoot.
If Arizona commits penalties like it did in the first portion of this campaign, then they can lose at Colorado. If they get a little bit too full of themselves, and again, they're going to get a lot of publicity this week, then they can lose to Colorado. But if they're steady and do the things that they've done over the course of the last month, they'll beat Colorado. And I think Damon's spot on in the Utah game. His comparison to UCLA is exactly right. I think even though the statistics maybe don't necessarily align, in my opinion, Utah has the best defense in the conference. But they're not as well-rounded as Arizona is. Arizona is good in all facets.
Yep.
They're good. I don't know that they're as good as Utah is defensively, player to player, just as I don't know if they're as good as UCLA is defensively, player to player. But they're better than both of those teams. I think they're more consistent than both of those teams on the offensive end. So if the defense can limit effectiveness with the other team's offense, then it's the type of thing where Arizona may be in a position to be able to do enough to be effective. Are they going to be 11 for 16 on third down against Utah? That's a tall order, but if you can keep them off the field again, eventually you're going to get a break in your direction. And Utah's just so woefully inconsistent against good competition on the offensive side of the ball. It's not always that way. They had a very good game against USC, but the UCLA game is a good example. I think you can favorably suggest that Arizona's defense is maybe Utah UCLA light. It's good. And if that's the case, then what Arizona was able to do against UCLA tonight, what Arizona's been able to do in the last couple games additionally, they can do against the Utes, and that gives them an opportunity at home, probably going to be sold out again. That's a great position to be in. And if they're steady against Colorado, they should win that game, and they're better than ASU. So you play with momentum and don't get too full of yourself, and don't start making the mistakes that you did earlier in the season. Arizona's got a lot of opportunities there to still do some really good things and maybe springboard its position for 2024.
Yeah, and like you said, I mean, I didn't think a lot of us were going to think that Arizona was going to be in a position here the last 3 or 4 weeks of the season where you look at the schedule and the last 2 out of 3 teams, you're clearly better than. I know, granted, Colorado, everybody said, and Brad said it too, 3-4 wins was probably what everybody was thinking, just given the talent and the issues going on there. But I don't think we thought Utah was going to have issues at quarterback all year. I mean, this Cam Rising injury was kept pretty under the rug up until the last few weeks here, and they don't have really an answer at quarterback. Their defense, like you said, they have the talent, they have the player, but Arizona has shown that they can go toe-to-toe with any team in the country, really, or at least team that they've played on their schedule. Washington, USC, UCLA tonight, Oregon State last week. I mean, the list goes on and on. So there's definitely not a game that Arizona is not in, or at least doesn't have a chance. I think you should win 8 games. I think if you win 9 games, it's a heck of a job. Jedd Fisch is Pac-12 Coach of the Year, and he's neck and neck with in my opinion, with Lance over at Kansas for potentially college football Coach of the Year. So it'll be interesting. Appreciate everybody's comments. Big day today. Arizona going bowling for the first time since 2016, 24-10 or 27-10, excuse me, over UCLA. Appreciate everybody. The great John Schuster, Brad Allis, Damon Fairall. I'm Ben White. We will be back with you next week. Mike Luke will be back with you. We got Arizona basketball coming into town here against Morgan State on Monday. We'll have a post game for that. And then next Friday, big game at Duke. So keep it right here on PHNX. Follow us on Twitter at PHNX_Wildcats. You've been listening to the PHNX Arizona Wildcat postgame show.
We all silly like the mayor.